I love you all! You know, Ozzy is sort of over the decades transformed into sort of a beloved godfather of metal, which is strange to think about if in the early 80s when he was more seen as a menace by many people due to his antics, his repeated attacks on avian creatures. So, how has he become this beloved icon? Well, he's sort of a shambling oaf if you've ever watched his TV show, the reality show. And I think his overall demeanor, he's certainly grateful and is the first one to admit how fortunate he is. And I think that endears him to people. And who could argue? He's fabulously wealthy, world famous. He has a great musical legacy behind him and hopefully some still left in front of him. He has a great wife. You know, you can't have everything. And of course, Ozzy has worked with a myriad of very fine musicians and some top-notch producers to put out some beloved albums over his career. So coming in at 12th, I'm going with 2020's Ordinary Man. Kind of an interesting album cover. Ozzy sort of decked out in a goth outfit with wings. You know, he's one pair of goggles away from going steampunk here. Now, a lot of people sort of criticize it for having too many people involved. There certainly were a lot of hands in the pot, so to speak, in creating this album. You know, I'm still glad it came out. It came out an interesting time in 2020, of course, during the pandemic. So it was kind of neat that a big-time performer like Ozzy had put out a studio album. And there were some worthwhile songs on this one. It begins with Straight to Hell. It's an okay, song. Slash plays guitar on this. It contains the word defecate, which you should never put in a song. I don't know what they were thinking there. Duff McKagan, also of Guns N' Roses, played the bass on most of these songs with the exception of one track. The production was done by Andrew Watt. The production, I don't have any problem with the overall sound of the album. I think it sounds pretty good. And unlike a lot of modern sort of compressed wall of sound type efforts nowadays, I was kind of pleased you could hear Duff McKagan's bass pretty clearly. Drums was largely performed by Chad Smith on this one. The second track, All My Life, that's kind of almost a ballad. It's pretty catchy. I don't have any problems with that song. Goodbye, again, kind of interesting. A lot of time changes in this one. So the album starts out reasonably promising. Ordinary Man, this one has Elton John, as most of you are aware on it. So you have two septuagenarians croaking out the lyrics. I'm never a big Elton John fan. Outside a Funeral for a Friend from Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. That's a heck of a song. Kind of like Bitches Back too. Other than that, not so much. Anyway, so I wasn't really fired up to see Elton John on this one. Under the Graveyard. That was sort of the first song I heard was released as a single. Good song. Good solid song. They do use in the chorus, the device of, oh, I don't know. Iron Maiden gets away with it, so why not Ozzy? Eat Me, that's kind of a ludicrous song. Not a big fan of that. Today Is the End. That's a pretty good song. Pretty catchy. It's a slow-paced song. Still very solid. And Scary Little Green Men, the 8th track. That's another highlight on the album. Tom Morello plays guitar in that one. Kind of a space feel, a nice catchy chorus. Yeah, it's a little silly, but I like it. Then again, Holy for Tonight. No thanks. And then It's a Raid. That's a collaboration with Post Malone. Tom Morello again plays guitar on that. That's just absurd. It's not so good. So there are some highlights on it. Like I said, I'm happy he put it out, and I hope he continues to put out albums. But overall, this is in my mind his weakest release. There was what they list as a bonus track. Take What You Want, and this was another collaboration with Post Malone. When rating the albums, because it's listed as a bonus track, even though it was on every electronic version and every CD and I guess they still sell cassettes, they said that, but not on vinyl. So I didn't count this. Not that it matters, I still rated it the lowest. But I would like to just mention Take What You Want. This song, when you look at it, you think, well, Post Malone, and it seems like that could be really a piece of crap. And so you open the CD, And it actually feels like that song is a compressed piece of crap. And you think to yourself, well, it couldn't sound like crap. I mean, that doesn't make sense. Crap doesn't utter a sound. But then you put your earbuds in your headphones, and the excrement particles from this song enter your ear and replace the earwax plug with what you now have as a dung plug. And it gets worse, because these dung particles then travel throughout your body via your circulatory system. They actually change you on a cellular level. You are now a shit golem. That's how bad this song is. This is an absolute abomination. So, my opinion of that song is it's not so good. No reason that should be on here. But anyway, Ordinary Man, yeah, still a worthy effort, but that's my number 12. For number 11, I went with an album I've never really completely embraced, and that's 2001's Down to Earth. This one was produced by Tim Palmer, another producer who really didn't have a background in metal, which doesn't matter. He still puts out a reasonably good sounding album. The lineup here was, of course, Ozzy, Zakk Wylde on guitar, and Robert Trujillo, his one appearance on a Ozzy album on bass. Of course, he was later to go on with Metallica. And on drums was Mike Bordin. There's a couple songs that, I do like on this one. The album opener, Gets Me Through. Yeah, it's a pretty good song. I'm not the Iron Man. Ozzy seemed to enjoy explaining he's not who we think he is. That's a pretty good song. Second track is probably the highlight of the album for me, Facing Hell. Good, strong track, catchy chorus. It's a good one. Dreamer, that's more of an acoustic, almost a Beatlesque feel to it. It's okay. No Easy Way Out is the fourth track. Another good, solid song. Fifth track, Then I Never Had. Excellent song as well. We've all heard live versions of that. Good, sludgy guitar sound from Zakk Wylde on that one. Zakk Wylde, incidentally, didn't lend any writing credits to this album, which is a little strange, but it certainly didn't affect his fine performance on the album. Joe Holmes had co-wrote That I Never Had along with Trujillo, and of course, Mr. Holmes was the guitarist for Ozzy for a number of years in the late 90s, but of course, Zakk Wylde had returned to the band in time to perform on this album. The sixth track is a small acoustic one. It's kind of interesting because it does kind of chop the album in two. It's only about a minute and a half long. I find the rest of the album a little bit forgettable. Black Illusion is a pretty good song, but the rest of it, overall just didn't do a whole lot for me. It's okay, there are some pretty good songs on it, but I couldn't rate any higher than number 11. Number 10. I hate to stick in the 21st century and rate those the lower, but what are you going to do? That's how it works out. I'm going with 2007's Black Rain. This one, of course, Zakk Wylde played guitar, Mike Bordin on drums, and Blasco Nicholson, notably from Rob Zombie's outfit. This one, it didn't grab me at first, but over the years, I've really come to enjoy it. It's some good stuff on there. Not Going Away. And kind of a typical Ozzy sort of mid-paced album opener. I Don't Want to Stop. The next one, that was sort of a single/hit for Ozzy. It's a good song. Yeah, sure, it's anthemic and, made to pump your fist to and all that. But it's pretty good. Pretty good. I do like the tone on that. I think Zakk Wylde's guitar sounds really good. Title track, really impressed with that one. Good one. Kind of plods along at a nice pace, and has a bit of an infectious chorus. That's a good one. The rest of the album is kind of hit or miss for me. 11 Silver is kind of an interesting song. Civilize the Universe is probably my favorite track on the album. Boy, that's a good one. Has a nice catchy chorus, still heavy, almost again, sort of a galactic spacey feel to it. Then that was kind of my problem on some of these later albums. It seems like the album's like progressing, going on a nice roll, whether it be regardless of they're fast paced or not. But here you have a few good songs, Silver, like I meant, or 11 Silver and Civilize the Universe, and then you get hit with a sappy, needless ballad like Here for You. The album ends up okay. Countdown's Begun and Trapdoor. The album kind of opens on a meh and ends on a meh. But there are some good songs in between. Overall, It's a good album. Yeah, now this one I bought when it, not that long after it came out, and I don't know, it's just the just sort of a cardboard case with a CD, no liner notes or anything like that. And I guess some of them were released like this. Kind of felt cheated because the album cover is pretty cool looking, but I guess I didn't care enough to go back and ever buy another copy of it, so I'll live with it. So number 10, Black Rain. And at number 9, I'm going with Ozzy's latest release, his 2022 album, Patient Number 9. Mental Patient and Lunacy. Ozzy's always breaking new ground thematically. But this is a pretty strong album. He collaborated with some of his longtime partners, Zakk Wylde and Tony Iommi, but also brought in very well-known guitarists, Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck, for a couple songs each. That's kind of neat. I'm not big fans of their music, but they're certainly notable figures. This has some pretty strong numbers on it, which is why I'm rating it a bit higher than many of his latter-day releases. The title track, Patient Number 9, not Love Potion Number 9 by Tigers of Pantang and other people. But it's a good, strong, typical Ozzy track, very melodic, a good song, and that's a collaboration, one of the collaborations like I was mentioning with Jeff Beck. The second track, Immortal, good, strong, heavy track. To me, though, the real highlights on this one, and I'm a huge Black Sabbath fan, and the two songs that he did in conjunction with Tony Iommi really stuck out to me. No Escape From Now and Degradation Rules. But the songs are pretty memorable. No two songs really sound alike, so it's a fun listen. The last song, Dark Side Blues, but that's a waste of time. They really didn't have to put that on the album. But other than that, very strong album. I'm delighted in 2022 Ozzy's putting out a album, collaboration of this caliber, and hopefully there's more coming. It was another production work of Andrew Watt. Some people have a problem with his production, but I think it's a good sounding album. So yeah, my number 9, Patient Number 9, oddly enough. And for number 8, another collaboration production-wise between Ozzy and Kevin Churko, and that is 2010's Scream. Now, of course, Ozzy fans will know this is the one album to feature Gus G previously and subsequently of Firewind on guitar. Kevin Churko actually played the drums on this one, and bass was manned again by Blasco Nicholson. I saw him in concert on the Scream tour, and the band sounded good. I was impressed. The album itself, the album was largely written by Churko and Osbourne and keyboardist Adam Wakeman, son, of course, of Rick Wakeman. And the first half of the album, I think, is pretty solid. Let It Die, another good album opener for Ozzy. Let Me Hear You Scream, once again, more of an anthemic song, but I don't know. Call me shallow, but I like some of the Ozzy anthems. It's good stuff. Soul Sucker, another good song, mid-paced. Life Won't Wait, more of a ballad, but it has a pretty heavy chorus. A little bit of an earworm. I like it. It's a good song. And Digging Me Down, the album's longest song at over 6 minutes. That's another good, solid song. One thing I do like about Ozzy's album, and this is probably my attention span being a bit older, I grew up in an era when albums, and because that's the maximum you can cram on there, was about 35, 40 minutes. And Ozzy tends to stick to somewhere under 50 minutes on these, and maybe that's my attention span, but I enjoy a good 10 to 11 song album, about 50 minutes long. After that, I'm old. I start to pass out or something like that, So just because you can cram 80 minutes on an album doesn't mean you always should. So, rest of the album, it's not as solid as the first half. There's nothing really bad or egregiously horrible on here, but just not real particularly memorable songs. I Want It More is a pretty good song. I could listen to the whole album, and there's not any duds on this one. So, Scream, number 8. Number 7, going to 1995's release, Osmosis. This one, again, featured Zakk Wylde on guitar. I thought it was very cool at the time, and still do, that Geezer Butler joined Ozzy on this album to play the bass, and drums was performed by Dean Castronova, a longtime Journey member, and he would actually play drums on, I think, the next two Geezer solo efforts in the 90s. So, kind of an interesting lineup. Rick Wakeman, from Yes, had manned the keyboard duties on this. Um, this was produced by Michael Beinhorn, not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who had experience with bands, Soundgarden and Red Hot Chili Peppers. So not exactly metal, but Ozzy in his later career certainly didn't stick to just people who worked solely in the metal or hard rock realm. This one has a number of really good songs. I know some fans criticize it, think it's perhaps not metal enough, but I enjoy quite a few on it. Perry Mason, the album opener, that's a really good song. I like the kind of the quirky subject matter of the lyrics. I mean, who would write a song about Perry Mason? There's a lot of things you could write songs about, but why Perry Mason? I like that kind of odd throw in now and then. Just want you, as far as ballads go, it's pretty good. Ozzy had incorporated the contributions of a number of songwriters, Purdell, Jim Valance, Mark Hudson, I think. And, so I guess it's given that you do get quite a varied mixed bag of the songs on this album. Ghost Behind My Eyes, yeah, it's a pretty good song. Thunder Underground, the fourth track, very heavy. That one was co-written with Geezer Butler, so one could see why that'd have a heavy, sludgier sound to it. See You on the Other Side. That was co-written by Lemmy for Motorhead. Of course, he had co-written a number of very successful songs on the preceding album to this, No More Tears. Tomorrow, Denial. Not too big fans of those. They're okay. My Little Man, that was co-written by Steve Vai. Not a fan of that song. No one cares about your kids, Osbourne. Quit making songs about them. My Jekyll Doesn't Hide, the ninth track, that was co-written between Osbourne, Geezer Butler, and Zakk Wylde. And of course, with a name like My Jekyll Doesn't Hide, has Geezer Butler's fingerprints all over it. He enjoys a good play on words. And ends up with Old L.A. Tonight, which I should dislike. It's sort of sappy and acoustic-y, but I really like it. It's a good album closer. So, yeah, Osmosis. I know some people don't like it nearly as much as I do, but yeah, I think it's a really good listen. So number 7, Osmosis. For number 6, going back to the 80s, I'm going with 1983's Bark at the Moon. This album is kind of I guess you'd say it's full of hits and misses, in my opinion. Ozzy, of course, in his werewolf outfit on the cover. I recall in the winter of '83 seeing this for the first time at a record store, and of course it was up there with the new releases, and I saw these two older and much bigger guys kind of laughing about how stupid the album cover looked, kind of making fun of Ozzy. And I remember it's saying, hey, shut up, Ozzy's cool. Of course, I said it under my breath when they were on the other side of the record store. Hey, I love Ozzy, but I'm not getting my ass kicked over him. Some good stuff on here. This one, of course, was the first appearance of Jakey Lee on guitar. Bob Daisley was back manning the bass duties, and as was Tommy Aldridge on drums. It was co-produced by Ozzy and Bob Daisley and Max Norman. Of course, Max Norman had worked with Ozzy on his previous 2 albums and would go on to work on quite a few metal albums over the next couple decades. Famous for working with Megadeth in the 90s. In the 80s, he worked on some Loudness albums, and Dangerous Toys from '89 had his production fingerprints on it. So, yeah, teasing and pleasing. Dangerous Toys, gotta love that. But yeah, he was on quite a few. He worked with other bands like Armored Saint and Sabotage. So he had kind of a neat production credits to his name. As for the songs, Bark at the Moon, it's a classic. It was a really neat video for the time too. By the time the video had come out, the drummer Tommy Aldridge was already out, and Carmen Appice would show up in that video playing the drums. But it's a great song. Bark at the Moon. Who doesn't love that song? Great riff, great solo by Jakey Lee. Good stuff. The rest of the first side, I was never a huge fan of. You're No Different. Now you see it, now you don't. Not a fan of that one. Rock and Roll Rebel. Are you really a rebel, Ozzy? What has he really done rebellious besides drink a lot? Anyway, Center of Eternity is a really good song. I always like that one. So Tired. Yeah, that kind of describes how the song makes you feel. Kind of tired. It's a slow one, a lot of piano. Slow Down's a good song, nice up tempo. And Waiting for Darkness, well, it's kind of a slower number, still pretty heavy. And it's a good album closer. I guess on European or outside the U.S. releases, it didn't have Center of Eternity on it. It had Spiders on it. But yeah, either way, it's a pretty solid album. I think in a lot of people's assessment, after the first two albums, this one was a little bit of a setback. But there's still a lot of good stuff on here. Like I said, it was kind of had some hits and misses for me. The album credits were given to Ozzy Osbourne. And I remember even back in 1983 when I bought the record, I was like, oh, really? Ozzy wrote all these songs by himself? Come on. And of course, years later, several litigations later, of course, Jake Ely and Bob Daisley were heavily involved in the writing of these songs. So, yeah, interesting album. Good stuff. Like I said, I rated it number 6. Still like it, even for all its warts. It's a good one. So for number 5, I'm going with the first appearance of Zakk Wylde in Ozzy's outfit, and that is 1988's No Rest for the Wicked. On this one, the lineup consisted of Zakk Wylde, Bob Daisley on bass, the late Randy Castillo on drums, John Sinclair on keyboards. For the production, they pulled out a couple of heavyweights on this one. Roy Thomas Baker, who every picture I've seen of him looks like a Will Ferrell parody. But what an amount of credits this guy had on his production resume. I mean, Queen, a couple Queen albums, Night at the Opera. He'd worked with Foreigner. First real big Journey albums, Evolution, and I think Infinity. Some other ones I'm forgetting, but the Cars. The Cars first, I think 3 or 4 albums. Just like I said, a real heavyweight, and also Keith Olsen. The year before, Keith Olsen had produced Whitesnake's huge selling self-titled 1987 debut album, and Fleetwood Mac's 1975 self-titled, another huge seller. So Keith Olsen, also another huge name in the production world in rock. So they put together an all-star team for this release, and turned out really well. I was a fan of this album when it came out, and still am today. Miracle Man, that's the album's lead track. That one, of course, is pointed at Jimmy Swaggart. Of course, Swaggart had been a very outspoken critic of a lot of this genre's music. And, of course, he was caught literally with his pants down, so Ozzy had a lot of fun with that. There was a video featuring Geezer Butler. Of course, after the album came out, Bob Daisley was back out of the band. That was a very strange relationship Bob Daisley had. He was in, he was out, he's writing songs, and it seemed like he was really on a yo-yo, but anyway, Geezer Butler had joined the band for the tour after the album release, so he was featured in the video, which likened Jimmy Swaggart and his followers to pigs. So, a little offensive, but kind of funny. Good strong tracks on the album. Devil's Daughter, Crazy Babies, that's another one, had a video for it. Good song. Nice riff in it. That's a good one. Breaking All the Rules, Bloodbath in Paradise. Yeah, fast-paced, good stuff. Fire in the Sky, I guess it's almost close to an epic as Ozzy ever released, and that's a really fine song. Fire in the Sky, really infectious sound to it, really sticks in your head. Tattooed Dancer, that's okay. Dance for Me, Bitch, that's sexist, Ozzy. Knock it off. Demon Alcohol's okay, and Hero, song I really like to close the album. Back when it first came out, Hero wasn't listed on the lineup of songs, so it kind of puzzled me the first time. I think I had the cassette, and this other song kind of came out of nowhere. It's a great song, though. Really well done. So, No Rest for the Wicked. Again, Zakk Wylde certainly performed some... it had an impressive debut with Ozzy, of course, following up on the previous fine guitarists that Ozzy had, Randy Rhoads and Jake Ely. Really made a splash with that one. And, of course, he would... remain with Ozzy up until, 20 years or so. So, yeah, good album. Number 5, No Rest for the Wicked. For number 4, Going with 1986's Ultimate Sin. Now, of course, this one was the last to feature Jakey Lee. Bob Daisley had written co-wrote most of the songs on this, but Phil Susan was in by the time the album was going to be recorded, and he contributed the writing on Shot in the Dark. Great song. And of course, Randy Castillo on drums. This one was produced by Ron Nevison, who had produced just the Huge Heart albums in the 80s, and had done work on a couple of great UFO albums from the 70s, Obsession and Lights Out, and a Michael Schenker group. So he certainly had some hard rock credentials to his name. And then again, he did do a Chicago album. Chicago. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Stink. Anyway, yeah, the lineup I've heard some people criticize the production, the sound of this album, sounding too 80s. Well, you know what? I hasten to remind you, 80s had some of the greatest metal, arguably, ever produced. It's not much of an argument. Great stuff in the 80s. I love this album. Starts out with the title track, The Ultimate Sin. It's drum solo, kind of amusing video for it too, with Ozzy as sort of a deranged oil tycoon. So it's a great song, a great opener. And then Secret Loser, another one I like. Yeah, nice pace, good song. Never Know Why. We'll never know why we rock. And kind of puzzling, silly lyrics, but it's okay. Then there's Thank God for the Bomb, kind of a sardonic take on the atomic or nuclear war prospect. Nuclear catastrophe. Let's go with the dangers of living in the nuclear age. A couple songs about this on the album. Thank God for the Bomb, a little more tongue-in-cheek, and later in the album, Killer of Giants, a little more serious tone. Good song, Killer of Giants. And of course, The Shot in the Dark is just a classic off this one. I always love the mellow intro to the song before it goes into the main riff. Pretty amusing video for this one too. Lady, attractive young girl gets picked up to go to a concert and slowly gets during the concert gets transformed into the demoness pictured here on the album with the well-formed rear end. So yeah, it was an amusing video. Great song. There's really good live versions of that you can hear on Just Say Ozzy EP, among other live performances. Fool Like You and Lightning Strikes, just solid songs. This is a really good one. So number 4, Ultimate Sin. So for the third best album, in my humble opinion, of Ozzy's discography, I'm going with 1991's No More Tears. This one's kind of an interesting one. This one, of course, Zakk Wylde played guitar. Bob Daisley was brought in to play bass. He didn't write any of these songs on this. And, of course, Randy Castillo on drums, John Sinclair on keyboards. There are 3 kind of, I guess you'd say, pretty big ballads that got a lot of airplay back in when the album came out. I gotta say, oddly enough, surprising to myself, I don't dislike them. I kind of like them all. They're pretty good. And, of course, I'm referring to Mama, I'm Coming Home, which was co-written along with 3 other songs on the album with Lemmy from Motorhead. Mama, I'm Coming Home, you'd hear a lot on the radio back in the day. I like it. I don't know why you have to include the term mama. I don't know what you're singing about, but it always sounds weird if you put mama in there. Oedipus Osborne, cut it out. The other songs that Lemmy had written on the album, Desire and I Don't Want to Change the World. Good songs. Hellraiser was the 4th one he wrote. And as fans will surely know that Motorhead also did a version of that on their 1992 album, March or Die. So, it's kind of interesting to listen to them both. I like them both. It's kind of interesting to hear Lemmy play one and sing one and Ozzy the other. The album opener, Mr. Tinker Train. Boy, that's a great song. Great guitar work by Mr. Wilde. What a awful topic, though. Same thing with the title track, No More Tears. What's your obsession with? It's just creepy. I don't know if you can get away with those song titles nowadays, but yeah, a lot of good songs on here. The other ballads were pretty good. Time After Time. Yeah, I always liked that one. Same thing with Road to Nowhere. Spoiler alert: the road leads to Ozzy. I know you didn't see that coming. Zombie Stomp. Yeah, it's kind of silly, but kind of fun. Most of the album was written by Zakk Wylde, Ozzy Osbourne, and Randy Castillo, co-credited. But like I mentioned, Lemmy had co-wrote 4 songs. And I think I heard in an interview him saying that he made more money from the writing the lyrics on these songs than he did in like his 15 previous years with Motorhead. Just believable. This was a huge seller for Ozzy. I believe it's his second highest selling solo album after Blizzard of Oz. So yeah, it's a really good listen. No More Tears, outside of the creepy subject matter of the song. It's a classic, you know. It's a long song by Ozzy standards, but really holds your interest through the whole thing. Great bass line to open, which was, I guess, written by Mike Inez, who had been the bass player for the last couple of years prior to this, but then Bob Daisley was asked to come in and play the bass on the actual album, and then was subsequently replaced back again with Mike Inez. So, Ozzy and his lineups, what are you going to do? Sin, S-I-N, another good one. There wasn't really too much in the way of a weak track. AVH, which, if I remember correctly, stands for Aston Villa Highway. Something about the football team Black Sabbath had supported back in their youth. They achieved a really good sound on this album too. It's just the overall production was really stellar on this. The guitar sound was great. Even when the acoustic numbers, or the songs that heavily featured acoustic numbers, really came off sounding well. It's a good album. I know a lot of people, probably because of the ballads rated a bit lower than I do, but I think it's a great album. And in some ways, it was a more serious effort, I think, too. Even the album cover, just shows sort of a thoughtful Ozzy. He's not dressed up like a werewolf, or he's not on the head of some sort of demon monster. It's just a bit more introspective than some of his previous work. So yeah, it was a little bit of a change direction. It certainly worked. Heck of an album. So number 3, No More Tears. The top 2, of course, in my ranking are the first 2 albums that he put out after his split with Black Sabbath. And I agonized over it, and I think a lot of people do. For the number 2, splitting hairs. I love them both. Both albums, his first 2 are absolute classics. The first 2, of course, he did with Randy Rhoads on guitar. Of the 2, I'm going with Blizzard of Oz as my runner-up. What can you say about it? So many classics on it. Of course, the lineup was Bob Daisley on bass, Randy Rhoads guitar, and Lee Kerslake on drums. Don Airey did the keyboards on this, as he did pretty much every album I think ever produced from 1978 to 81. He seemed like he was on every album I had, playing keyboards. Maybe they cloned him, I don't know. But yeah, so many classics on here. Of course, Crazy Train. Crazy Train's one of those few songs where we've all heard it, thousands and thousands of times. But, when that comes on the radio, I don't turn it off. I still like it even after all those times. I Don't Know, another great one. That's, of course, the album opener. A little more occult-driven. Mr. Crowley. Oh, what a great song that is. This creepy use of keyboards. Beautiful solo by Randy Rhoads. Great stuff, of course, based on the occultist Aleister Crowley. Revelation, Mother Earth, another great song on this one. Who knew Ozzy would become such an eco-warrior? But again, great guitar work by Mr. Rhoads. The other song, Suicide Solution, that has a great riff in it. I always liked that song. It's kind of ironic, Ozzy cautioning people about alcohol use, but it's kind of funny. So the other song, and I guess I could say that the reason I took this as number 2 as opposed to number 1 is, I think there's a few tracks that I just don't dislike by any means, but they're just not stellar. And I'm referring to Goodbye to Romance, No Bone Movies, and Steal Away. They're good songs. Again, Randy Rhoads is stellar as he always was, but I don't love them. And whereas the other album I'm about to mention, I think I love just about every song on it. So I have nothing really bad to say about Blizzard of Oz. It's a classic, as we all know, and that's my number 2. And like I mentioned, the aforementioned follow-up is 1981's Diary of a Madman. Kind of a silly album cover, but it certainly worked for 1981. I think the first song I heard from this album was Flying High Again. I'd heard on the radio in the summer of 81. But it's just enchanting guitar work by Rhoads, really, really stuck out. And, the first side of that album had such great songs. Over the Mountain, Flying High Again, You Can't Kill Rock and Roll, and Believer. Great stuff. So Ozzy's band on this one was the same as was on the previous, on Blizzard of Oz. Lee Kerslake, Bob Daisley, and Randy Rhoads. Of course, when the album came out, as fans are aware, it pictured Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge, but of course they didn't perform on the actual album. The second side really has some good songs too. You know, not as famous tracks, I guess you'd say, as the first four, but Little Dolls. You know, I always love that drum intro. It's a great song, kind of creepy too. Tonight, that's sort of a ballad. I guess if I had to pick a song, a weaker song on the album, that would be it for me, but it's still pretty good. Boy, what a great song Sato is, or Sail Aboard the Ozzy. That's just a great song. It flows along beautifully. Again, great guitar work by Rhoads. Ozzy's voice never sounded better, I don't think, on this than it did on this album. And of course, the epic ending of the album, "Diary of a Madman." It's just a great album, you know, top to bottom. So that way, by a hair, I'm going with "Diary of a Madman" as my favorite album of all time by Ozzy Osbourne and his band. Don't forget, like the video, subscribe, because you'll want to be notified of different rankings and the other videos we'll have on the channel. Let's see, the next ranking I'm going to do is who has the best in metal. All right, who wrote this? You know I'm going to read this. So after 11 studio albums by Ozzy Osbourne, fans are looking for some other stuff. Again, I don't rank the live albums, but Ozzy's put together some pretty darn good live albums. Of course, the first one he released as band was Speak of the Devil, or Talk of the Devil in the United Kingdom. And that was essentially a collection of live versions of Black Sabbath with Brad Gillis playing guitar, Aldrich and Sarzo as the rhythm section. And that was an interesting listen to hear different takes. You have to remember, in 1982 when it came out, there was no official live Black Sabbath albums with Ozzy. And so this was the first chance, really, we had to hear live versions with Ozzy, albeit with a different backing band. Now, of course, fans know that Black Sabbath had put out Live Evil, and of course that's always a debate, like what's a better album, Speak of the Devil or Live Evil. And they're a bit different because it was neat to hear Dio singing some of the older Black Sabbath versions, but it was also very cool to hear Ozzy with singing songs that you didn't hear on Live Evil, like Never Say Die, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Fairies Wear Boots, etc. My first impression of Speak of the Devil was it was blasphemy, because I was a big Black Sabbath fan, and it just didn't sound right, people playing these songs. But, over the years, I love them both. So, but anyway, Speak of the Devil is kind of an interesting listen. Other live albums that Ozzy's put out over the year, like the Tribute from 1987, it's neat to hear Randy Rhoads' versions of a lot of Black Sabbath, and of course the Ozzy songs from the first two. That's a very good album. Sold very well, too. Some of his other ones, like Live and Loud from 93, that was kind of an interesting one. I remember the first album, or the first song on that track, if you look, is Paranoid, which was, usually an encore. So it was kind of fun to hear Paranoid as the opening song on a live album. And of course, Live at Budokan was another strong release from Ozzy a little bit later in his career. I think that came out in 2002. So some little, I guess, lesser known songs. Now in 2000 and I think it was 5, he put out Undercover, which was a collection of covers. Obviously, isn't that clever? He did a bunch of covers, and they name it Undercover. That's great. Anyway, there's a couple good songs on there. I'm not a fan of listening to him do like John Lennon and Beatles songs. I don't need to hear that. But there's some of the heavier songs, like Mississippi Queen was a pretty good version on it. So there's some decent songs on that. A couple like B-sides that he'd had over the years. You Looking at Me, Looking at You. It's kind of a silly title, but it's a pretty good song. That was a B-side from the Blizzard of Oz period. And another one that was I don't know if it was B-side, but it should be obvious, by the way, to the viewers. I don't really rehearse these. Another one, I don't think it was a B-side. It was a bonus track, perhaps, on the from the Osmosis period, and that was it was co-written with Tommy Shaw and Jack Blades. And Whole World's Falling Down. You can hear it, like I mentioned, as a bonus track on Osmosis. That's a really good listen. And, he sprinkled some other, on some of his compilations like the Ozman Cometh or the Prince of Darkness box set. You can hear a lot of interesting demos and different versions of songs. So those are kind of interesting. So there's more than enough material, I think, outside of his 11 studio albums, if you're curious. So give those a try.